The early morning sun softly filtered through the branches lining the quiet and cozy Lakeview Street, scattering dancing patches of light onto the ground. Clara Robinson strolled through Central Park with her constant companion, her loyal dog, Bruno. At 72, Clara relished the peaceful, unhurried pace of life in the small town of Riverwood. Her silver hair peeked out from under a knitted cap, and her steady hands firmly gripped Bruno's leash. Bruno was no ordinary dog. A large German shepherd with a poised demeanor and calm gaze, he was a true veteran. 3 years ago, he had completed a stellar career as a K-9 officer with the Riverwood Police Department. After retiring, he was taken in by Clara, who had been grieving the loss of her husband. Since then, the two had become inseparable. Clara often joked that Bruno wasn't just a dog, he was her guardian angel. And to find out what happens next, don't forget to like and subscribe. The adventure continues. The morning unfolded as usual. Clara and Bruno wandered through the park, enjoying the crisp air and the tranquility. But as they approached the old bridge over Duck Pond, Clara noticed two unfamiliar figures. One was tall and lanky, with disheveled chestnut hair. The other was shorter and stocky, with a hood obscuring much of his face. They stood near a bench, talking quietly and glancing over their shoulders as though they were looking for someone or something. Years of honed intuition warned Clara that nothing good would come from this encounter. Tightening her grip on Bruno's leash, she prepared to quietly turn around and head home. But before she could take a single step, the tall man stepped forward, blocking her path. "Well, what do we have here?" he sneered, his eyes sizing Clara up. "A grandma out for a walk with a fancy dog, huh?" "Yeah, a nice little pup," his shorter companion added with a mocking smirk. "What's his name, ma'am?" "Bruno, is it?" Clara tried to hide her fear, but her trembling voice gave her away. "Excuse me, gentlemen. I was just heading home." The tall man stepped closer, his grin widening. "Not so fast. You've got something we might need," he said, pointing at her purse slung over her shoulder. "I don't want any trouble," Clara said, trying to keep her voice firm, though her hands shook. "Neither do we," the shorter one said with mock courtesy as he moved closer. "Just hand over the bag and we'll leave you alone." At that moment, Bruno tensed. His ears stood straight up, and his sharp eyes locked onto the two men. Clara felt the leash tighten in her grasp. "Please," she tried once more. "I'm just an old woman. Let me go." But the men weren't listening anymore. With a swift motion, the tall one grabbed her purse, yanking it forcefully from her shoulder. Clara let out a gasp, stumbling back. That was all Bruno needed. With a deep, guttural growl, he sprang into action. Leaping at the attacker, he sank his powerful jaws into the man's arm. The assailant screamed in pain, flailing wildly as he tried to shake the dog off. "Get him off me, you stupid old witch!" the man howled, dropping the purse and flailing his uninjured arm. The shorter man pulled a knife from his pocket. "I'll show this mutt his place," he snarled, advancing toward Bruno. Clara screamed, "Bruno, watch out!" But Bruno was a trained fighter. Releasing the tall man's arm, he turned to face the new threat with an even fiercer growl. The man with the knife hesitated, his confidence visibly wavering in the face of Bruno's power and determination. "Let's get out of here," the tall man shouted, clutching his injured arm to his chest. His companion cursed under his breath, backing away before turning and sprinting after his partner. Bruno continued to growl, his unwavering eyes fixed on the fleeing men until they disappeared from sight. Clara exhaled shakily, her heart pounding, but a wave of immense pride and gratitude washed over her. "You're my hero, Bruno," she whispered, wrapping her arms around her loyal protector. Clara sank heavily onto a wooden bench, trying to collect herself. Her hands still trembled, and her breathing was uneven. Bruno, her loyal companion, approached her and gently nudged her hand with his nose. His calm and steady demeanor exuded reassurance, as if he was silently telling her, "It's all right now. I'm here. You're my hero, boy," Clara whispered, wrapping her arms around his sturdy neck. But she had no idea that their ordeal was far from over. This day was only the beginning. Once the adrenaline began to subside, Clara and Bruno made their way home. Her cozy little house on Linden Lane had always been her sanctuary. The home was steeped in memories, the shelves lined with framed photographs, baskets overflowing with colorful yarn, and the air filled with the faint aroma of freshly baked bread. Bruno remained on high alert. As soon as they crossed the threshold, he methodically inspected every room, checking every corner as if ensuring their safety. Clara locked the door behind her, her hands still shaking. She sank into her favorite floral armchair in the living room and pulled Bruno close. "You saved me, Bruno," she said, her voice quivering with gratitude. "If it weren't for you—" Bruno lifted his head, his warm brown eyes full of understanding. Resting his chin on her lap, he seemed to promise, "I'll always protect you." But Bruno's instincts told him that the danger wasn't over yet. While Clara tried to calm herself with a cup of fragrant tea, Bruno paced near the window, alert to every sound outside. His years of training as a police dog hadn't left him, even in retirement. Meanwhile, across town, the two men were holed up in a seedy motel. The taller one, Ray, grimaced in pain as he wrapped his injured arm with a filthy towel. "That damn dog nearly tore my arm off," he muttered, wincing. "You said this was going to be easy," his partner Steve retorted irritably, examining his knife and wiping it with a piece of cloth. "Just some old lady with her purse. How was I supposed to know she had a dog? A bloody Terminator of a dog." Ray angrily tossed the towel onto the floor. "We should have just run away right off." Steve slammed the knife onto the table, making Ray flinch. "We're not done yet," Steve said coldly. "What do you mean?" Ray asked, frowning. "That dog humiliated us," Steve said, his eyes burning with malice. "You want everyone laughing at us? Tonight we're going back." Ray froze, stunned. "You mean break into her house?" Steve nodded, his face devoid of hesitation. "Yes. We'll show her who she's messing with. We'll take anything valuable we find. She won't go to the police. She's just a scared old woman." Ray nodded reluctantly, though unease churned in his gut. He didn't like the idea, but he knew better than to argue with Steve's unpredictable temper. Unaware of the looming danger, Clara busied herself in the kitchen. She hummed softly to herself as she prepared Bruno's dinner. The morning's events still lingered in her mind, but she tried to push them aside. "Well, it all turned out fine," she said aloud, stirring a pot of chicken and rice. "Bruno protected me. What else could possibly happen?" But Bruno didn't share her sense of relief. He stayed by the front door, his ears pricked forward, attuned to every noise. When Clara called him to his dinner bowl, he approached reluctantly, glancing back toward the window several times. "Come on, boy," she coaxed gently, setting the bowl down. "Your favorite, chicken and rice." Bruno quickly devoured the meal, but he returned immediately to his position by the door. He stood guard, ready for any threat. Clara gave a faint smile. "You're acting so strange today, my protector." She had no way of knowing that the night would bring a new danger. "You're so restless," Clara said softly, stroking Bruno's head. "No one's coming after us. You scared them off." Bruno tilted his head slightly, but the alertness in his eyes remained unwavering. Clara might not understand, but he knew better. Just past midnight, when the streets of Pine Hill were shrouded in silence, Bruno caught something on the wind. A faint, nearly imperceptible scent. But it was familiar. His muscles tensed and the fur along his neck bristled. Outside Clara's house, two men crept through the shadows. Ray, the tall one, and his shorter partner, Jake. Ray held a crowbar in his hands, while Jake, grumbling reluctantly, kept watch. "Quiet," Ray hissed as he moved toward the back door. Inside the house, Bruno was already on edge. His ears twitched, picking up every faint noise. At the first sound of scraping near the back gate, he darted upstairs to Clara's bedroom. His powerful, urgent bark shattered the night's stillness, waking her instantly. "Bruno, what's wrong?" she asked, rubbing her eyes groggily. But Bruno's bark wasn't the usual kind. It was an alarm, a warning. Clara knew her dog wouldn't wake her without a good reason. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand and tiptoed downstairs, Bruno at her side, tense and ready to act. Approaching the window, Clara cautiously parted the curtains. At first, she saw nothing. Then her eyes fell on the back door. In the moonlight, she spotted two men. Ray was already fiddling with the lock, while Jake glanced nervously over his shoulder. "Oh no, not again," Clara whispered, her heart pounding. "Hurry up," Jake muttered. "That damn dog's probably inside." "Relax," Ray hissed back. "I've got this." But before Ray could finish with the lock, Bruno let out another fierce, bone-chilling bark. The sound was so loud and savage that Ray dropped the crowbar with a clatter. "What the hell?" he swore, fumbling to pick it up. Clara, her fingers trembling, had already dialed 911. "This is Clara Winslow, 15 Linden Lane," she whispered into the phone. "Someone's trying to break into my house." But Bruno wasn't about to wait for the police. The moment he heard the lock give way with a metallic snap, he charged toward the back door. His low growl was louder and more menacing than ever. Ray, struggling with the door, flinched at the sound, but tried to mask his fear. "It's just a dog. Let's get this over with," he muttered. "Then you go in first, tough guy," Jake snapped sarcastically. Before either could make another move, the door burst open, and Bruno shot out like a bolt of lightning. Ray barely had time to raise his arm before Bruno leapt at him, knocking him to the ground. The crowbar clattered to the side as Ray screamed in pain. "Get him off! Get this dog off me!" he yelled, trying in vain to shield himself. Jake, seeing what happened, turned and bolted toward the fence. But Bruno, quick as ever, released Ray and sprinted after Jake. His powerful paws dug into the ground as his deep growl stopped Jake dead in his tracks. Jake froze, raising his hands in surrender. By the time the police arrived, both men were thoroughly subdued. Ray sat on the ground clutching his shoulder, while Jake cowered against the fence, too terrified to move. Officer Sarah Mendoza stepped out of the patrol car. Her face lit up when she saw Bruno. "Bruno, still on the job, huh, old friend?" she said, kneeling to pat him on the head. "Best partner I ever had. Good work, buddy." Clara, still clutching her phone, stepped outside. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with quiet determination. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "It's all under control, Mrs. Winslow," Sarah assured her. "Your hero here did it again." As the officers led the two criminals away, Ray turned back toward Clara. "This isn't over, old lady," he sneered. But Bruno let out a thunderous growl, so fierce that Ray recoiled, falling silent. "Get them out of here," Sarah said with an exasperated eye roll. The next morning, Bruno's bravery was the talk of Pine Hill. The Pine Hill Tribune ran a feature story about the hero dog who stopped two intruders. Though Clara was still shaken by the events, she couldn't help but feel an immense pride for her dog. She stroked Bruno's head gently and whispered, "You're everything to me, my boy." "A small mistake?" Judge Maren Brooks repeated sternly, her tone slicing through the silence in the courtroom and freezing everyone in their seats. "Your little misunderstanding involved breaking and entering, attempted robbery, resisting arrest, and threatening behavior. Do you really consider that a trivial matter?" Corey, who had appeared smug moments earlier, faltered. He fidgeted, but then attempted a weak rebuttal. "We just mixed up the house, Your Honor." "We didn't even steal anything." Judge Brooks, renowned for her no-nonsense demeanor, arched an eyebrow and leaned forward. "So, in your view, smashing a lock with a crowbar, threatening an elderly woman, and fleeing from the police qualifies as a mere misunderstanding?" A ripple of hushed whispers spread through the courtroom. Even Jake, seated next to Corey, lowered his head and began squirming in his seat. "Your actions were deliberate and dangerous," the judge continued firmly. "You intentionally targeted someone you believed to be weak, but you were unfortunate enough to encounter someone far stronger than you could have imagined." Her gaze shifted to Duke, who sat calmly next to Margie, his focused eyes tracking every movement. A slight smile touched the judge's lips before she turned back to Corey. "You should count yourself lucky that this someone is a dog with discipline and intelligence. Otherwise, the consequences could have been far graver." The prosecutor approached the stand, presenting phone records and text messages retrieved from Corey's device. A message displayed on the courtroom screen read, "This house is perfect. Old lady, no security. Easy money." This text, sent by Mr. Corey an hour before the break-in, clearly demonstrates his intent, the prosecutor stated, and surveillance footage from the neighbors shows both defendants walking directly toward Mrs. Winslow's home with clear purpose. Corey slumped further in his seat, while Jake looked even more dejected. When Margie was called to speak, she rose nervously but maintained an air of quiet determination. "I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this," she began, her voice soft but steady. "But I am deeply grateful to Duke. Without him, I don't know if I'd be standing here today. He's not just my dog, he's my family, my protector." Her words elicited a wave of murmured approval from the audience. Even Judge Brooks, known for her rigid demeanor, nodded respectfully. "Your honesty and courage are commendable, Mrs. Winslow," the judge said. After a brief deliberation, Judge Brooks delivered the verdict. "Corey McCain and Jake Pearson, I sentence you to 2 years of incarceration for breaking and entering, attempted robbery, and resisting arrest. Let this serve as a reminder that the law protects those in need and ensures justice for those who exploit or harm others." The courtroom erupted in applause. Margie exhaled deeply, relief evident on her face, while Duke, as if sensing the outcome, gently licked her hand. Later, on the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed around Margie. "Mrs. Winslow, how do you feel after everything that's happened?" a young journalist asked, holding out a recorder. "I feel grateful," Margie replied, stroking Duke's head. "Grateful for this incredible dog, for our police force, and for everyone who supported us." Duke appeared unfazed by the attention, his eyes scanning the horizon as though still on duty. "Duke has always been brave," Margie added with a smile. "Even during his years in the police force, he was the best partner anyone could ask for, and he's just as vigilant now." The story of Duke and Margie quickly became the stuff of legend in the small town of Pine Hill. The gavel's sharp strike echoed through the courtroom, marking the end of weeks filled with fear and uncertainty for Margie. It was as if the weight she had been carrying on her shoulders finally lifted. At her feet, Duke wagged his tail gently, sensing his owner's relief. His calm presence, as always, gave her strength. Margie ran her hand over his head and whispered, "We did it, boy." The courtroom began to stir as people stood, murmuring about the proceedings. A few approached Margie to offer their support, including Officer Jamie Lopez, who extended a warm handshake with a smile. "Great job, Mrs. Winslow," Jamie said, her gaze dropping fondly to Duke. "And you, hero, you've done it again." "Thank you, Jamie," Margie replied, her voice trembling with relief. "I couldn't have done this without your help, the support of the police, and everyone who stood by us." Jamie noticed the glimmer in Margie's eyes and smiled wider. "You know, Duke has always been special. Back when he worked in the force, he was a true professional. And now, even in retirement, he's shown that his spirit is as strong as ever." Margie looked at her loyal companion. "He's more than just a dog to me. He's family." As they stepped out of the courthouse, the streets of Pine Hill were alive with energy. Word of the sentencing had spread, and people had gathered to show their support. Reporters, representatives from the local paper, and even children holding signs that read, "Duke is our hero," stood waiting. A reporter stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Mrs. Winslow, what's it like to be a hero alongside your remarkable dog?" Margie smiled, though she felt a bit overwhelmed by all the attention. "I'm not the hero here," she said, stroking Duke's head. "He is. Because of his bravery and determination, I'm able to stand here today." The crowd erupted into applause, and the children holding signs squealed with excitement. One young boy ran up, clutching a small bag of cookies. "These are for Duke," he said with a wide grin. Margie accepted the bag and thanked the boy before handing the treat to Duke. He took it gently, earning another round of cheers from the crowd. Later, as the excitement died down and the crowd began to disperse, Margie and Duke returned home. The house, which had once been a place of fear, now felt like a haven of safety. Margie settled into her favorite armchair while Duke curled up at her feet. She gazed out the window, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. "We did it, Duke," she said softly. "It's all behind us now." Duke, as if understanding her words, looked up at her with his wise, gentle eyes and rested his head on her lap. In that quiet moment, Margie felt it in her heart. Life in Pine Hill was returning to peace once again.